This is a pretty serious situation. Food insecurity in Yemen has now reached very alarming levels, with nearly 5 million people who are severely food insecure and another 5 million who have an inadequate diet.
The food shortage in Yemen reaches a critical phase as millions face poor nutrition. And actress Ashley Judd silences her demons through a cathartic biography and humanitarian causes.
I just don't think I can keep what I have unless I give it away, and the greatest joy I find is in being of service.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
Thanks once again for joining us. Also this week, the International Criminal Court has found former Congolese militia leader Thomas Lubanga guilty of forcibly recruiting and using child soldiers under the age of 15 during the civil war in that African country. The judgment was the tribunal's first since it was launched almost a decade ago. According to the verdict, Lubanga, 51 years old, enlisted children, that's being boys and girls, younger than 15, to serve as his militia's personal bodyguards and to participate in the hostilities. Don Bob is speaking with the UN's Radhika Kumaraswamy via Skype about the verdict.
It's the first verdict of the court and also the first verdict of the court on child recruitment. So for us, it's a very happy day. I think it signals the end of impunity for recruiting children into the armed forces or armed groups. It'll serve as a deterrent, I think, to many. So it's a very good day. And I think what we hope is that the victims will also receive some reparations from the trust fund and we can move ahead. And also, I think what's interesting is it'll be the first time, I think, that the jurisprudence on this issue will also be written because, as you know, there have only been one other case, the Sierra Leone case on child soldiers. So what the judges say as to what is recruitment and what is enlistment and what is conscription, all those definitions, etc., will be fleshed out in this judgment. So it's a very important day for child protection.
What sort of a signal does it send to those who may have been doing so and continue to do so, that is, having children as child soldiers?
Well, I think it makes some of the people that I meet in the field, sometimes when I meet some of these rebel leaders, they don't know that it's a crime, or they didn't think it was a crime, they say. So now at least there's no ambiguity. This judgment will be heard around the world, especially in the DRC, and therefore in the related areas. And it will be very clear that this is a crime. This is a war crime. There's no second words about it, and you will be punished if you engage in it.
On another matter, Madam Kumaraswamy, I understand that you signed some sort of an agreement with the Sudan People's Liberation Army of South Sudan concerning children under 18 or under 15 in the army. What is that all about?
Well, basically, as you know, there are two processes that are dealing with child soldiers. One is the International Criminal Court. The other is the Security Council. As you know, every year we have been asked through the Secretary General to provide a list of parties that recruit and use children by name, with the possibility of targeted measures against these parties. The SPLA has been on this list since 2006 as someone who recruits and uses children. In 2009, we signed an agreement with them, but we continue to receive reports from the local areas and from the militias that are being integrated. So since they're now a national army, we had to re-enter this, and we are telling them, as a national army, that it's about time that within a year they should make sure that all their barracks and their training centers, everything is child-free.
About your visit to South Sudan, what can you tell us about that visit?
I went today to the border area near South Kordofan and the Blue Nile, and they're expecting thousands of South Sudanese who will be coming from North Sudan in the next few months, or exactly in a month's time. Numbers vary as to how many will be coming. And the world is not prepared for this as yet. And I went with UNHCR and they were showing me there are already spontaneous camps that have been set up. And we really need to focus a little bit on this problem of this influx of refugees from Sudan to South Sudan, and the need to make sure that children as well as everyone else are protected and we have the resources to deal with that kind of large influx.
Anything else you can tell us about your trip to Sudan? Well, I know you're
the other areas is Jonglei province, which I may not be able to go to, even though it was all planned, because basically there was inter-ethnic conflict over cattle and child abductions. And the government has decided that the best way to stop these kinds of inter-ethnic fighting, or at least the scale of it, is to remove all the guns. So they have moved to Jonglei province and have begun what they say a voluntary disarmament of the groups. We don't know how it'll go. So at the moment things are tense. But this issue of child abductions as a cause for inter-ethnic conflict in the Jonglei state is something that also concerns us. And through UNICEF and other UN agencies, we're trying to work with the communities to try and build trust over this issue.
The UN's Radhika Kumaraswamy. To the Middle East now, where a survey carried out by the World Food Programme in cooperation with the Yemeni Central Statistical Organisation shows that 5 million people are unable to produce or buy the food they need. According to the survey, the food crisis in Yemen is affecting up to 10 million people, or almost half the population. World Food Programme spokesperson Ibi Etefa discussed the food crisis in Yemen with Derek Mbata.
This is a pretty serious situation. Food insecurity in Yemen has now reached very alarming levels, with nearly 5 million people who are severely food insecure and another 5 million who have an inadequate diet, which means that they are food insecure and probably face the danger of being severely food insecure. So here we're talking about almost half of the Yemeni population struggling to feed their families. This is a comprehensive food security survey that was done by the United Nations World Food Programme in cooperation with the Yemeni Central Statistical Organization and UNICEF. Data have been collected in most of the governorates, probably except two. The rates of malnutrition are exceptionally high also for some parts of the country.
What is causing food insecurity in Yemen?
Well, hunger is on the increase in Yemen, and the reasons are several. First of all, Yemen was one of the least developed countries in this region and was already struggling even before the current civil unrest. Rising food prices, rising cost of fuel, all of these factors combined have pushed many more families into poverty. But also the civil conflict and the civil unrest that has swept through the country for the last year or so, all these factors are taking a toll on many, many families.
Now, is this problem of food insecurity in certain areas of the country or all over Yemen?
Well, most of the areas that have been hit hard by the severe food insecurity are the areas that have seen a lot of civil unrest. So not surprisingly, that includes, of course, some of the areas where fighting has been happening in the south, as well as the areas in the north of the country where prolonged war has taken place. There are so many IDPs in the country, around 670,000 internally displaced people. In addition, if we look at the urban centers where many of the civil unrest has been boiling, specifically, for example, the capital, Sana'a, you see alarming rates of food insecurity. Malnutrition rates, again, are very high, especially in some of the governorates like Hudayyada, and it's one of the area of the governorates that has seen quite a lot of civil unrest. So there's definitely a correlation between the situation that the country is facing in terms of violence and unrest, in addition to the poverty, the lack of water, the shortage of fuel, and different other factors.
Now, is there a threat of famine in Yemen?
I think if the international community steps up its efforts and we are able to address the needs of the Yemeni people with immediate food assistance, we can spare Yemen a famine situation. I don't think that we have reached this level to say that it's a famine, but it's a serious situation.
Now, what is being done to try to provide food for these food insecure people in Yemen?
Well, WFP has already scaled up its humanitarian assistance this year to feed 3.6 million vulnerable people in the wake of the sharp hikes in food prices and displacement of people fleeing the conflict in the northern and the southern regions of the country. We're prioritizing 1.8 million severely food insecure Yemenis, especially the women and children, as well as the internally displaced and the conflict-affected people. But also we are working and collaborating right now with the partners, the government, other UN agencies, NGOs, the donors on the ground to ensure that whatever is left between the 5 million that who are severely food insecure and the 3.6 million people that we're feeding are not left unassisted, and that we do not have gaps in the system. So at this point, 3.6 million people are getting the assistance. We're working hard with all the other partners to meet the urgent needs of all the people that need the assistance in Yemen.
Are there enough resources to make sure that this is actually done?
Well, WFP has put a budget this year for Yemen for around $207 million for the 3.6 million people that we are assisting, so far we have got around 50% of that appeal, and we're definitely hoping that we're going to see more donors contributing to the emergency in Yemen, but not just for WFP, for all the humanitarian actors on the ground, because this is exactly what we need to collaborate on at this point and make sure that we're addressing all the needs, whether they are covered by WFP or the other NGOs that are working on the ground supporting this emergency.
That's Abira Tefa with the World Food Programme ending that report by Derek Mbata. While more than half the world is made of water, inequities exist that limit access for millions of people around the world. The 6th Water Forum has just taken place in Marseille in France, and it attempted to come up with solutions to combat the inequity. The goal is to tackle the challenges the world is facing and to bring water to the forefront of political agendas. The good news is that ahead of the conference, the UN announced that the international target to halve the number of people without access to safe drinking water has already been met ahead of the 2015 deadline. But Ben Braga, the chairman of the forum's committee, says more needs to be done. Julie Walker spoke with Mr. Braga during a break in the conference.
We are having a conference. It's addressing different water issues, and we have been focusing on finding solutions for the water problems that we face today, be it in the area of water supply and sanitation, be it in the securing water for food production, energy production, and so on and so forth.
So far, what has come out of this conference?
Well, as a matter of fact, it's going to be on Friday, the final results. But so far, we have been receiving some very innovative propositions in terms of having an international convention providing good conservation of watersheds in terms of producing water for the rivers. Also, some financing mechanisms for improving the quality of sanitation systems. Also, we are having a ministerial conference in which ministers are discussing how to manage rivers that flow through 2 or more countries. So in order to have a better security in terms of minimizing chances of conflicts between countries upstream and downstream.
So what are the biggest challenges that the world is facing when it comes to water?
I think it's more of finding the right mechanisms to allow the poor countries to have their water supply and sanitation services built, operated, and maintained. So I think the biggest problem we face today is still the issue of access to water and sanitation, followed by the understanding of the world community on the importance of having large water infrastructure, dams and reservoirs in the rivers in order to cope with the changes in climate, in terms of coping with variability in climate, in order to secure water for the human population in the future in terms of quantity, basically. But later on, we will have to discuss on water quality also. So I think these are 2 major challenges, is access to water supply and sanitation, and how are we going to build this required infrastructure to adapt to climate variability and change.
What kind of commitments are you looking for from countries attending this conference?
Well, for example, the United Nations General Conference passed a resolution on the human right to access to water supply and sanitation. And so we have hopes that some ministers attending this forum here will commit themselves to implement that concept in their home country.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
This week, Julie Walker also spoke with Konstantin Huber, an executive director at the World Bank and a member of its board. At a special 2-day meeting last week held to discuss the UN Economic and Social Council, it was raised about how the Council may wield significant influence within the structure of global governance.
I have been very much encouraged. Clearly so, there is a big improvement since I have taken part the last time, it was 2 years ago, in the ECOSOC meeting. I think it's also due to the new president of the ECOSOC, Mr. Kotarek, who gives it a special twist, and he tries to give it a little bit of a new direction, and I think this is working very well. It was a good interactive process, and a lot of new things came up.
When you say a lot of new things came up,
first of all, I'm encouraged in terms of concrete policy measures which have been presented here and discussed by the participants. I'm also encouraged as far as the future role of ECOSOC is concerned, and I think from the new trend and the new wind we can experience here now, that in future there might be indeed a significant role of ECOSOC within the global governance structure, and I could imagine a strong cooperation between G20 and ECOSOC, and thus giving ECOSOC more decision ability through the inclusion of G20 decisions, but on the other hand giving G20 more inclusivity.
is it fair to say the role of ECOSOC has been diluted a bit? And what are you hoping that their new role will be?
As I said, there is a possible new role in the global governance structure ECOSOC could play. I think ECOSOC, from its definition, would be very well placed to do that. And on the other hand, I think there is still a huge potential coming from ECOSOC in terms of providing independent analysis and policy measures and taking up from the discussions also the views and inputs from member countries. And this is a very specific element which can contribute to productive dialogue and to constructive processes in the way forward.
What do you hope the outcome of this will be?
It is clear that there's progress in the ECOSOC process. This is enough. I think this is the message I want to get across. Big stride forward, good improvements. And if we can maintain this momentum over the years, I think we will get somewhere. And what is also important, I think, is that now we hope that it's not one time per year event we have here together with the IMF, the Bank, ECOSOC, UNCTAD and others of the UN family, but that there will be during the year continued dialogue and probably working groups, so that what we have now heard and discussed can be further digested and elaborated to work out concreter steps how to go forward.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
Celine Paramunda, one of the representatives from civil society speaking at the same meeting, believes there must be more thought put into the role that women play in the world economy. Mrs. Paramunda represents the Society of Catholic Medical Missionaries. The overall theme at the two-day meeting was coherence, coordination, and cooperation in the context of financing for development. And Ms. Paramunda also spoke with Julie Walker about the issues surrounding sustained, inclusive and equitable economic growth.
This ECOSOC meeting is mainly about job and finance. And you know, the financial crisis affects women ultimately, especially the poorest of the poor. In the rural areas, the poverty is concentrated. And I was very much struck by yesterday's World Bank representative saying 1 billion people living below poverty line. So in this modern world, it is nothing to be celebrated. In fact, it is a shame for us. And we talk about job creation, economic growth, and even if the GDP, the economy of each country is doubled or tripled, there will be poor people because the distribution system is not just. Unless we attain social justice, there will not be any equality or salvation for all the people.
Was there anything encouraging coming out of this meeting, especially when it comes to women?
Many of them mentioned about the current system is not right, especially the economic system. So we need to develop alternatives. I haven't heard anybody particularly talking about women, but the economic system, they said. So I don't think they give adequate importance to women's role in economy.
Tell me about your organization. How does your organization help women and especially the poor?
In fact, our organization started for women, the Muslim women in India who could not meet with the male doctors and who were dying of pregnancy-related diseases. So our foundress, Dr. Anna Dengel, mainly focused on the poor women, and she started our organization to cater to the health needs. And over the years, we realized health is related to so many other socio-economic, cultural and environmental issues. So we are involved in many of these issues, especially in the rural areas of around 20 countries. So we try to empower women socially, economically, environmentally, culturally, through various programs.
Tell me about your presentation at the conference.
What I shared in this session was about the cooperatives. One of our members, Sister Rose Kaitingara, she was recently awarded by the Nagaland state government in India for her efforts to bring the women from poverty through self-help groups. She organized 109 self-help groups, especially with the women, and started purchasing their produce and selling essentials in a very cheap price. So that encouraged women to form as cooperatives, and there are so many cooperatives in more than 52 villages in India. So this is one way of helping women to help themselves to come out of poverty. And that is why mainly I said the values of cooperatives, if we replicate it in the micro and micro level, we can achieve economic and equitable development.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
And finally to actress Ashley Judd, who has released a biography titled All That Is Bitter and Sweet. In it, she opens up about emotional and sexual abuse she endured as a child and what led her to work as a humanitarian activist fighting human trafficking. The actress has long been involved in humanitarian work, but it was only a few years ago that she took up the cause of fighting human trafficking. Since then, she's been raising awareness about the issue. Simone Monet-Sibien spoke with Ashley Judd at a public meeting as she reads a passage from her book and then discusses various aspects of her life.
I am often asked why I regularly leave behind my comfortable life, my beautiful farm, my incredible husband, to visit squalid and often dangerous places, advocating sustainable grassroots programs that improve the lives of the world's most vulnerable people, bringing attention to the core causes and conditions of their suffering. I go because I must. I go because I love it. But why do I love it? Why do I eagerly, even as I induce my own grief, lean into gender equality, human rights, and social justice work with such zeal? I am, by the grace of God, slowly learning that piece of my own story. I've been on the front lines of the battle against preventable diseases like malaria and HIV/AIDS, traveled into the depraved world of human trafficking, sex slavery, and labor slavery, visited the palaces and corridors of power, engaging the decision makers who can improve public policies. My aim when I began this journey was to make my life an act of worship, to be useful to my fellows. To do this, I would witness firsthand the stories of the poorest of the poor and carry their narratives like treasure home to the richest country in the world, America. I hoped it might be possible that I could help change and perhaps even save lives. What I did not expect was that the one life I would change and save would be my own.
So, how did a life of service change and save your life? How did recovery change and save your life? First, start with the humanitarian work. Maybe we'll come into the recovery later.
Well, I've been taught that I can't keep what I have unless I give it away, and that what I have isn't really mine. It belongs to God as I understand God, which is a word that I don't necessarily like using because it means so many different things to so many different people. And what I mean, by the G word, and a lot of times too, by the way, it's the God of my misunderstanding, is something loving, benevolent, powerful, good, and gracious that is, peace. And a lot of times when I pray, I'll switch the words out. I'll say peace, or I'll say love, or I'll say, Percy, the name of my perfect kitty cat who loves me unconditionally. So, if the G word loses any people, try to stick with me. Yeah, I just don't think I can keep what I have unless I give it away. And the greatest joy I find is in being of service. You know, there's a love and a tenderness that I feel when I'm with vulnerable people. That's the sweetest thing. It's like mother's milk. It's the sweetest thing I've ever been a part of, and I can't get enough of it. And I'll just keep doing it. You know, that moment when that one kid in the slum who's been, you know, edgy and standoffish and hard to reach, when they finally crack, or the little girl does that exhale and just falls into me, or the old lady who's working so hard to keep all her grandchildren alive because her children and her children's spouses are all dead from HIV or other preventable disease. There's just nothing like it, you know? There's just nothing like it. I don't know how else to explain it.
Actress Ashley Judd there discussing her biography and the challenges she has faced in her life and career. And that is The World for this week. If you want to learn more about the program or wish to make a contribution to the show, then please do visit us at www.theworldradioshow.com. From there, you can subscribe to the podcast and also access our Facebook page to join the discussion on any of the topics raised in this program. The World is committed to bringing you stories that affect the people of our planet, either on a mass or individual scale, and we hope to do so with balance and integrity. As always, we welcome your comments and your suggestions, so please do keep in touch via www.theworldradioshow.com. The program is produced and compiled by Tim Stackpool, and I look forward to your company next time. Until then, bye for now.